lovelies. I know that the political content that I make is now unpopular with a lot of you, and it costs me subscribers and friends whenever I do dip back into commentary, which is weird because that's how this channel originally blew up more than the gaming stuff. But, you know, society has shifted around me. I seem to have stayed in much the same place. And I know a lot of you have never shared my left anarchist philosophy or my social small L libertarianism, and that's fine, to the extent that it's fine. This shift around me has been true of the small c conservative people who call themselves left-wing but aren't, and the people on the right who think of themselves as small L libertarian but aren't when it comes to social causes, at least not when push comes to shove. This has mostly been fine in the past. You know, I believe in the power of games to bring people together despite divides and so on, and we have tended to focus here on this channel on the things where we do, at least ostensibly and temporarily, agree. Free expression rights, for example, though people abruptly change their minds on that when it's something they don't like, which is disappointing, because what's the point of fighting for free expression we all agree is fine? Where's the point in that? Anyway, that has held for whatever less zealous people there have been around me, and yeah, this is primarily a games channel, but it's also a culture channel, and more importantly, it's a me channel. I make the videos that I want. I follow my whims and interests, and politics has long been one of my interests. You know, I'm actually qualified to talk about it. I have expertise in it. I don't have separate channels for all the separate things that I'm interested in because I do YouTube wrong, and because I'm stubborn, and because, despite all evidence to the contrary, I believe in you, dear viewer, that you can make the lack of effort not to click on a topic that you're not interested in. And yeah, I stream all of my content into different collections, different playlists on my channel as well, so feel free to use those. Most of my games are not political. I don't make propaganda. I don't want to make propaganda. I make art, I think. Some people insist that all art is political, but we'll circle back to this because it's important, and the politics does relate to the art even when the art is not in and of itself political, just not in the way that you might think. And so I want to kind of explain and contextualize why I do still comment on politics. For a great many people around the world, this Trump victory is absolutely devastating. And like I said back at the failed assassination attempt, the first one, this time I think their fear is justified, and this time I don't think there are guardrails on this administration. This time is different, and the first time, honestly, was bad enough in a whole bunch of ways, despite being somewhat hemmed in and controlled. Yeah, I was right in my commentary back then at the failed assassination attempt. I should have stuck to my guns rather than let people bully me into shutting up, I think. Live and learn. I'm entangled in his awfulness because I work with LGBT people. I work alongside and with people in the adult industry, which is under threat. I have friends, acquaintances and co-workers in Ukraine. The guy who's made some of my jewellery is from the Ukraine, and I worry about him. I have friends, acquaintances and co-workers in Taiwan who now feel extremely vulnerable. Several people I've known since way back have married into Polish families, and Poland feels very vulnerable right now, right on there on Russia's border. I won't belabor the point more than that, but even before I get to my American friends, lots of people have very legitimate fears and concerns, and fears that more women's rights will be taken away, and more of other people's rights will be taken away. that life will be made harder, more difficult, more miserable and immiserated for a great many more people. And they're not wrong at all. They're almost certainly right, even if 10% of the agenda goes through. Trouble is, and I do promise this will cycle back around to games, trouble is we've heard that same fearful message for years. Naive as I was, I thought Bush Jr. was as bad as it could get, and that only something as traumatic as 9/11 could turn America that way. People back then were cheering on the abrogation of their privacy and their civil rights, and the weird Christofascism that was on display then from the likes of the Westboro Baptists, or revealed to us all in the film Jesus Camp. But no, that wasn't as bad as it could get. That was merely the warm-up act. American politics is frequently frenzied and hysterical, with accusations of Marxism thrown one way at people who aren't remotely Marxists, and cries of fascism thrown the other way at people who aren't remotely fascists. And what America doesn't really have a left, so there's nobody you can really legitimately call a Marxist, and its right is far right by anyone else in the world's standards. But it turns out that crying wolf isn't really that helpful when the wolf does finally arrive, and here it is at our door, huffing and puffing. But nobody's listening anymore, or nobody cares. People seem to care more about the price of eggs and petrol than their liberties and freedoms, let alone the liberties and freedoms of their neighbours. How cowardly, how selfish, how short-sighted, but also how human. And we have failed to learn from history. I mean, obviously, as someone who believes in freedom, I am upset by the Trump win, because this is an authoritarian right, and who knows how much they'll get away with. I am also disgusted by the crowing, by the sore winners, the kids at school shouting "Your body, my choice" at little girls, copying, I think, Nick Fuentes. Obviously, I'm worried about this uniquely American form of fascism that threatens to overwhelm whatever safeguards and controls remain or are left. And obviously, I'm distressed at the heartlessness and pettiness of the sore winner mentality. But I've got to be straight with you, and I've got to sort of even the scales slightly. The people on the other side of this are frequently just as awful and show no sign whatsoever of having learned anything at all. I see a lot of women blaming men collectively as a whole and threatening to go on a sort of women's strike similar to the 4B movement in Korea. I see a lot of collective blame and scapegoating, albeit of different, more acceptable groups to scapegoat and blame. Yeah, scapegoating people like immigrants and trans people, that helped power Trump. And here these people are, the loyal opposition, doing exactly the same thing, just with different, much broader, more socially acceptable scapegoats, like men, or white people, or straight people, or cisgender people, or whatever else it might be. Yeah, I see these LGBT people whose fears are legitimate, lashing out in exactly the same way that got them in this situation in the first place. Becoming what they claim to hate. And so it goes, and so it goes, and so it goes. And I see the blandishments and the horror and the terror, but it all rings hollow because however real and genuine the threat might be, people were at this fever pitch last time, and before that, and before that. Their dial is always at 11, just as the other side always is for communists and Satan and other bullshit. And nobody's listening anymore, for good reason, because it's been a hysterical siren for all that time. This is a huge part of how the American non-far right done fucked up. And there's no easy way to fix any of it. I was talking with a friend on a podcast yesterday about this, and the only way to reinstall trust in the media or politics and so on is to be trustworthy for years and years and years. And I don't see that happening, whether it be in the mass media or whether it be in politics. There's no easy fix, and people only want easy fixes. So I told you I'd circle back around to how this affects games and me as an artiste and creator. And I'll go a little bit beyond the obvious, and I'll point a finger this time at the zombie left, the pseudo-left, the pseudo-progressives, whatever you want to call them. Amongst those blandishments and those motivational poster messages and things posted on social media and supposed stirring calls to action has re-emerged the phrase, all art is political. To which I say, no it isn't. And it is profoundly disrespectful to the artist, to me as an artist, to impose that upon them or upon me. Not all art is political. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, or a constable is just a landscape. And yes, sometimes a dungeon is just a dungeon. I have made a bare handful of overtly political games, I suppose. The Little Grey Book is a non-partisan attempt to create an intensified example of the judgmental social media panopticon we've built for ourselves, with everyone judging everyone else to impossible standards. Imagination is an attempt to explain the experience of mental illness and the urgentness of addressing it. But beyond those, not really. Maybe a couple of others you could, at a stretch, say were political, and I might nod slightly and not object as much as I feel that I probably should. But these theorists are adopting a political lens through which they view everything. And so they assume that everything is political, not judging what they're looking at on its own merits, but only through their lens. But that doesn't make what they're examining political. If I look at your reflection in a funhouse mirror, that doesn't mean you're fat. It means the mirror has optically changed what one sees to where it looks like you're fat. And so it goes for art. Just because you're examining it with a feminist lens or a Marxist lens or a Christian lens doesn't mean what you're seeing is actually there. It means your vision is distorted. And like I say, it is profoundly disrespectful to impose your insanely biased read of someone's work onto them, especially while they're there, still around, telling you that no, that's not what it is. Yet these people do it anyway, pissing people off, to the point of even fighting the actual artist, me in this case, over it. They say that the production of art is necessarily rooted in your standpoint, experiences, etc., and that those are all necessarily 100% political. Well, by that metric, everything is political, which in turn means that observation means fucking nothing. Because the term loses all meaning by becoming completely universal, and that's madness. That way lies madness. It's like how the word spiritual has been robbed of all meaning, becoming a mere noise, a bark or a squeal, because it has become so all-encompassing that it therefore describes nothing. When someone tells you something is spiritual, you have no further information about it than you had a second ago. And so it becomes, if you make political, so all-encompassing. So most of my work is not political. Some of it has elements of social commentary, or is a reaction to someone else's attempt to impose politics. But it really isn't political for the vast and overwhelming majority of it. And I do not preach in my games at people. You're not going to find lectures in my games for the most part. There might be a subtext, but it's not propaganda. That doesn't mean I am apolitical. I separate these things. I respect my audience enough not to treat them like children, not to hold their hand constantly and spell everything out in large letters in non-toxic crayon on circles of paper, or to spoon-feed them. I dare say most artists' output is not political. But here these people come telling me that it is, ignoring me when I contradict them and tell them it's not, politicizing work that has no political intent. holding writers accountable for the things that their fictional villains do, saying that we're being political by being apolitical in our work, however political we might be outside our work. And it's madness. It is, again, I must stress, massively disrespectful to the artist. And more importantly, with reference to recent events, it turns people off whatever other point you might be trying to make, because you are disrespecting them and you are imposing your view of things onto them with nothing factual to point at. It's different if you have actual facts to point at. You know, both sides of this political divide seek to impose their funhouse mirror view onto me and onto my work. Whether it's shrieking Trump derangement syndrome or shrieking fascist, it can all fuck off. And I'm not going to tell you to leave because you disagree with me politically. Most of the time you're not going to find my political views in my games. And I'm not going to tell you to block me or whatever just because you, against all reason, voted for Trump. Both sides here, or didn't, both sides here could do with exposure to other points of view, outside points of view, less parochialism. The only way I'm going to say you should fuck off is if you're not going to respect my expertise, my point of view, or if you're going to project your bullshit onto me. You know, fuck yourselves off rather than forcing me to eject you, because I hate doing it and I feel like a hypocrite and I feel dirty every time I block or dismiss somebody. But some of you all force me into it. Nobody has learned a goddamn thing since 2010 or so. It just gets more and more entrenched, worse and worse. One half of people hasn't learned how to reach out, hasn't moderated what they're trying to do to others, and the other half has gone off into conspiracy theory and crazy town and utter venal selfishness. Half the US and about a third of the world seems absolutely fine with the Americans putting in a rapist, a criminal, a con artist in charge of America, torching health regulations and giving an absurd Bond villain a whole bunch of power. And the remainder seem mostly fine with doubling and tripling down on their own brand of social tyranny. Now, tyranny with political and material power is worse, I think, than tyrannical social power, but you're kind of splitting hairs at that point, and we're all going to find out just how bad it can be in both directions. But nobody seems to learn anything, and nothing looks to be getting any better anytime soon. So if you must label me anything at the moment, make it nihilism, I suppose, and spare me your prickish excuses for either the authoritarian right or the tyrannical progressivism that is anything but progressive. Cha.
Flick pig. There's no big story to this, even the title's just a way to get away with writing fuck pig. It's not some earth-shaking attempt to thrust upon you the evils of meat eating. I eat meat because it's fucking delicious. David Cameron got me thinking about pigs. Then I got into some arguments with vegans. Then I made a horror dungeon game in which you play pigs trying to escape a horrible, fantastical slaughterhouse. That's about it. If that upsets you, do one. A print-and-play OSR dungeon crawl with pigs. Available at post-mort.com and drive-thru-RPG.
The normal question, the first question is always, are these cannibals? No, they are not cannibals. Cannibalism in the true sense of the word implies an interspecies activity. These creatures cannot be considered human. They prey on humans. They do not prey on each other. That's the difference. They attack and they feed only on warm human flesh. Intelligence? Seemingly little or no reasoning power, but basic skills remain are more remembered behaviors from normal life. There are reports of these creatures using tools, but even these actions are the most primitive. The use of external articles as bludgeons and so forth. I might point out to you that even animals will adopt the basic use of tools in this manner. These creatures are nothing but pure motorized instinct. We must not be lulled by the concept that these are our family members or our friends. They are not. They will not respond to such emotions. They must be destroyed on sight.